Good evening, good morrow, and good day, and welcome to another campaign diary and Q&A here on Slice and Dice. The last one, in fact, of 2020. I know, this year is almost over. It's such a shame, but as you can see here, going to get in the festive swing a little bit this week. But not entirely. I will not be donning full festive gear until the final Many Lands campaign session, which will be a week Monday. So I'll be saving this hat for then. I'll just leave it on the side for now. But speaking of festive things, before we get into tonight's campaign diary proper, I've got some very, very important news and very last minute, really. This is hot off the press that this Sunday is the date that we will be running our giveaway as part of Tabletop Crafter, our friends at Tabletop Crafter, and their advent calendar for this year. There's over 150 independent TTRPG-based businesses involved this year. We are lucky enough to be one of them, and we're giving away a tier 3, that's right, our top tier subscription for a month here on Slice and Dice. And here's what you could win. Here's the picture here, you can see with all the things. So you get a bonus custom subclass, the Dragon Warrior Fighter subclass that I've built, along with with a bit of a hand from a couple of the players. You also get all 3 of our emotes for Twitch, which you can see them displayed there of some of our players and myself. You get access to the VIP chat on Discord. That's the subscriber-only chat on Discord, where we'll ask you questions, we run polls, come up with ideas. Usually it's also to do with other content as well, that you suggest ideas for that, or that we ask you questions like, what would you like to see more of on the channel? You get an adventure PDF, as yet unseen adventure PDF from an adventure I have run in the Many Lands campaign, written by myself. You also get a discount on our Teespring store, and the top tier subscriptions get the best discount, surprisingly, on our Teespring store for merch such as this t-shirt I have here. That and many other collections are on our Teespring store, and you, as a top tier subscriber, get a discount with that. You also get a PDF of the wonderful map I have behind me. I'm on the wall there. You get one of those for yourself, which you can print at your leisure. And most fun, I think, is creating your own NPC, which will then be used in the Many Lands campaign. So there's a form that you can fill in, and we'll kind of do a bit of back and forth, developing your character and how they fit into the story. And then we will introduce that NPC into the game world that you, that's right, you, as a top tier subscriber, created, which is fantastic fun. So that's for free. You get a top tier subscription with us here at Slice and Dice. So enter on the 13th of December. That's this Sunday. You can enter, I think, by liking the post, by following Tabletop Crafter, following us, and following all of the other businesses that are taking part on that day. I don't currently know who those are, but I will be sharing it like a crazy person on that day. So make sure you're following us at sliceand6 on socials, particularly on Instagram, I think, for this giveaway, to make sure you don't miss out. There we go. So that's I think that's all I needed to say on the Advent giveaway. I am going to leave it here, however, because I think it's a good reminder for you guys to have, should you join in the stream halfway through, just to remind you to win that top tier subscription. That's what you need to do. So let's move over then to what's happened in the last couple of sessions here in the Many Lands campaign. Well, this year, I was going to recap more on this year in general as well, about it's been a bit of an interesting year for all of us, I'm sure, but it's been a sometimes rocky kind of transition for us, from going from a game in actual play and live play here in this room in the studio to then going to an online-based game. So it's been a bit of it's taken some getting used to, but I'll talk more about that sort of later on in today's stream. But in the meantime, let's recap on what happened in the last 2 sessions, shall we? So in session 58, so we're rapidly approaching session 60 now, very exciting. But in that last session, as the group had kind of got over the mountain climbing aspect of ascending the Erie until they got to the path, which they had been told about by the Aarakocra monks, Kerr and Beak. The path was a kind of a literal rite of passage for would-be monks of the monastery of the Erie. The Aarakocra would have to pin their wings back before attempting the path, so that they would not be reliant on their flight and would instead hone their other skills and, hone the use of their arms and legs, which as martial artists is quite important, and also meant that they had to think differently about problem solving as they overcame each of the tests on the way up the path. And at the end of the path, at the top of the mountain, was the entrance to the Erie. So the group were about to start on the path. However, they had noticed overnight, as they had been fighting the giant snake in the Snake Lake, for lack of a better name, along with the bounty hunters that had been on their trail, fighting on two fronts. They had noticed a meteor fly overhead and smash into the mountain, and it was actually along the path before the first test that gap had formed, and so they went into the kind of natural cave that had been formed by this meteor crashing into the mountainside to investigate and see what was inside. Now, originally, this was going to be a good entrance for one of our guest stars, and a very exciting guest star on the stream. However, due to work commitments and landing a role in another TV series, unfortunately couldn't be introduced at that time, but we've got him on the back burner for later on in the campaign. I'm sure when he's free, it'll be very good and very exciting. I'll tell you more about that when we get nearer to it. But it was also this whole thing about the meteor crashing into the mountain was a fake dice roll, as suggested by DK, one of the players, which was a meteor crashes into Earth and a mind flare comes out of it, and he made the suggestions basically at the beginning of the campaign, so he'd almost completely forgotten about it and has had a nagging feeling in the back of his mind that it was something like that. So the guys knew what they were getting themselves into. They were bracing themselves for a mind flare, and I didn't disappoint, except for it was a bit of a twist, really, subverting their expectations a bit, because whilst yes, there was a mind flare in there, it was trapped under rubble, it couldn't really move. The player characters had never come across the Illithid before, never come across this aberrant creature, and so didn't really know what to make of it. And the fact that it was speaking to them in another language via psionics, it was doing it telepathically, was very strange, but nothing malicious about it, especially since it had been asking for help. So it had been translated by the two people that could understand the creature. Which in this case was Kerr, because he had tongues cast on him, and Neris, for reasons she doesn't fully understand, could understand that language. So hearing that it needs help, they go in there, they're quite cautious, things look a bit odd, there are dead Aarakocra along the ground as well, something's clearly gone wrong here. And then as they are trying to figure out what to do, wrestling with this thing's clearly evil, it seems to be evil to the players, but the characters aren't going to know that, and then deciding what to do with the creature. Then, unbeknownst to them, until some canny use of detect thoughts by Seth with his medallion, there was actually another creature in the room, and in fact, one of the Aarakocra wasn't dead. It had instead had, I guess, the original. Hello, should be studying. Thanks for tuning in. I guess the original Aarakocra was dead. Its mind had been destroyed, but instead had been replaced by that of an intellect devourer. And the intellect devourer had then taken control of the Aarakocra's body. And so it was waiting for the right moments with the group coming into the room to then ambush them. And ambush it did on Seth. And although it didn't go that well, because very quickly the rest of the party then turn and fight this thing, it was enough time to cause a bit of disruption, giving the Mind Flayer enough time to then sneak up behind Malar and get its clutches into him. And had it survived for another round, it could well have eaten Malar's brain, which would have been horrific. So I'm glad that didn't happen. Should be saying, hi everyone, hope everyone is having an awesome weekend. Same to you. Same to you, should be studying. I hope you are as well. And I hope you're counting down the days till Christmas now, and obviously whatever holidays you celebrate besides that, and the New Year, of course. So anyway, as I said, this is going to be our last campaign diary and Q&A for this year. So if you have any burning questions about the campaign, write them down now. Get in touch via the chat on Twitch. So anyway, once the Mind Flayer was then defeated, actually the Intellect Devourer proved more of an issue, because once the Aarakocra that it was embodying had been slain, it then jumped out of the Aarakocra's corpse, and then they suddenly had this brain, just a human brain, but with kind of feline, almost furry arms and legs coming out of it, which is quite grotesque. Then they had to fight that, but they did overcome it without too much of an issue. And it was also after that happened, when in the aftermath, where they were kind of trying to figure out what else was in this cave and how to proceed, that we had some really fun moments, because I then introduced another voice that was then speaking to them telepathically, although this one turned out to be Master Talon, the master of the monastery of the Eyrie. So this time not a malicious voice, and one that Kerr would recognise straight away to belie any fears that the group had, which is a nice little moment to then carry on that theme, like, oh, I sense that evil is gone. Then in addition to that, the party, being, player characters in Dungeons & Dragons campaign, wanted to investigate and find some loot, because why wouldn't you? You're adventurous, you want to find some treasure, right? Unfortunately, I hadn't really prepared much for this, and so when they said this, they got a good roll, and kind of thought on my feet, well, if this Mind Flayer arrived on a meteor, there must be some kind of mechanical or otherwise organic kind of steering mechanism of some kind. There must, it must have been piloting this meteor in some way. And so that was on the spot where he came up with the precious stone that they got hold of, a almost spherical grey kind of navigation and power core that the group discovered, and kind of worked out a bit of its ability through the use of detect magic and identify, helped to identify what it was, of course, because I've got two party members with really handy spells for finding out what spells do. So that was cool. But yes, immediately had to come up with that on the spot, which I thought was a fun addition, although it was, at the time I was panicking a little bit, like, oh no, what have I done? Have I created something completely that's going to destroy the game? No, of course not. They don't know exactly what that item does or what it powers. They just know that it's a power core of some kind at this point. And in fairness, neither do I. So we'll work out what that's going to be used for later on. So after finding that item, the other thing that was quite fun was Brucon finally, after carrying this item for a long old time, decided that he was going to do some drugs, because he received this powdered not solvent, but anyway, this powdered substance that was known as fallen stardust, which is in essence a drug that causes certain effects, and it for a limited time heightens your perception massively, like makes you see through time almost, kind of makes you really wired, but then has really nasty side effects. Now I thought that the Brucon, being a dwarf with very good constitution score, was easily going to pass the constitution save. Turned out he fluffed his roll and instead failed that, which now means that he's addicted to that substance, which means he's going to want to take it again. And since then, I've been sort of toing and froing with Bart about the other things that this substance does, because I wanted to have it all written down so that it wasn't reliant on my memory. And so I've kind of inputted on D&D Beyond with the item, so now Bart can see exactly what it does as well, so then he knows what happens next time he takes it. But basically, the long and short of it is there are some crazy side effects that can happen. In fact, I'm going to share a couple of them with you now. I'll just bring up the page, because in all likelihood we may not see many of the side effects. We may see one or two possibly, but I doubt we'll see all of them. So now is probably a good time to share and see what you think of those. Let me just bring it up right now. So fallen stardust is a stimulant in white powder form. When ingested through nose or mouth, temporarily heightens senses for 10 minutes, raising your perception to 20 if not already higher, and gives advantage on perception checks. When the effect raises your wisdom to 20 if not already higher, and gives advantage on perception checks. When the effect wears off, the user will have to make a DC 15 wisdom saving throw or become addicted to this substance. Oh, it's a wisdom save, not a con save. Well, even so, also being a monk probably has good wisdom, fail the save. For subsequent uses, it requires a DC 10 constitution check, increasing by 1 each time. A failure results in short-term madness, and a failure of 5 or more results in them taking 4d6 points of psychic damage, as well as becoming paralyzed for 1d4 hours. If the damage is enough to knock them unconscious, they'll need to make death saving throws as normal, but would be paralyzed if stabilized. So as I said, some very nasty side effects to that, that the constitution check ramps up each time they take it. And then the madness and the rest, it could go horribly wrong, because drugs are bad. Addiction is bad. Overcoming the addiction will be challenging. After 1d3 days without taking the substance, the character will suffer one of the effects in the table below. The effect will last until they finish a long rest, when they will need to re-roll on the table. So it's a d10 for this table, because there are 10 different effects. If you roll a 1, the character suffers exhaustion. The character immediately suffers 3 points of exhaustion and sweats profusely. If they roll a 2, they get irritable. The character has disadvantage on charisma checks. In addition, when a combat is initiated, the character becomes hostile to any creature within melee attack range. The character must use their action before moving on each of their turns to make a melee attack against a creature other than themselves within melee range. The effect wears off 1d10 minutes after the combat ends. Sloth, if they roll a 3. The character's speed is halved. In addition, the character has disadvantage on dexterity checks and saving throws. Not very good, that one. So I think they start really nasty and get slightly nicer with each one. 4, migraine. The character suffers a horrible headache. They immediately suffer 2d6 points of psychic damage and have disadvantage on concentration checks. So for spellcasters, that one's a doozy. 5, blinkered. The character has disadvantage on perception checks. In addition, they lose the dark vision character trait if they would usually have it. 6, hunger. The character will need to eat at least 3 days of rations or suffer disadvantage on all attack rolls and ability checks. The effect ends when the character has eaten the required amount. So, not so bad if you can eat enough rations. 7, dull. The character's charisma drops to 5 unless lower, and will struggle to hold a conversation. So there's a bit more of a role-playing aspect on that one. 8, anxiety. The character has disadvantage on charisma saving throws and believes others are conspiring against them. So a bit of paranoia kind of seeping in there. 9, tic. The character develops a noticeable tic, such as sudden scratching of the skin, wincing, or twitching. And then 10, lucky. The character suffers no negative effects. To completely get over the addiction, the character will need to have not taken the substance for a number of days equal to 2d10 plus the number of times substance taken minus charisma modifier, a minimum of 3 days. So it would take you a minimum of 3 days to get over your addiction. As it says, after 1d3 days without taking the substance, the character will suffer one of the effects in the table below. So if you're trying to get over it, you're at least going to have 1 day where you have a bad side effect before completely ridding the addiction, which seems realistic to me. You shouldn't be able to just kind of cakewalk through it, but equally could cause some chaos and some interesting storytelling stuff and challenges for the character as well, because, you need to be taught a lesson for taking those bad things. So, after Brucon takes that, the party then decide, because he was trying to help with the investigation, looking around the place, and that helps find the sphere. The party then decide to head on to the next test, as they kind of covered everything here, and the clock is ticking. They want to get to the area as quickly as possible before more prisoners are taken, or in fact before the bone dagger that Jackman Winklebottom, the gnome that they really are after, the manticores and so on, is discovered. It's only a matter of time before he's found. So they want to get there first and put an end to this operation and see whether the Red Mages are involved after all, or who this druid woman is they heard about. So, So whilst most of the party head on to the first test, which is a tunnel with a crawl space, it's kind of like, it's more like, I guess there's been a recent avalanche, but the rocks have fallen in such a way that there is a crawl space through it. That's kind of the idea behind it. It's very kind of precariously built, this particular structure. But while most of the party go there, Brina, the deep gnome, who has been attached to their Aarakocra guide Kerr by way of a papoose for quite some time, then sees the drawbacks of being attached to him via a papoose when Tongues wears off, and Kerr is very keen to go and find Master Talon, who supposedly is in hiding within the mountain. So he flies off with Brina attached, flies off way ahead of the rest of the group, completely separating her from the rest of the party, which kind of sucks. Not the most fun, but equally it meant that she's kind of going off on her own tangent, doing her own story for a bit, which is a bit of a challenge DMing to then split the party in that way and then having to kind of go back and forth between the two. But I feel I get the balance right when we do this. Please let me know if you disagree or have any alternatives to that. But I thought, if you're sitting around the same table and somebody goes off and does their own thing, it shouldn't be a case of that then everyone has to go with them, that you always have to stick together. Surely if a character wants to go off and do their own thing, they should be allowed to do it, and we pursue them separately. But equally, we give weighting to the rest of the group as well, so that everyone gets a chance in the spotlight and everyone gets to kind of do what they want to do. And I feel like that the balance was right with that. There was a danger possibly in session 59 where we had Brina then kind of fading into insignificance because the rest of the group were then fighting stuff and she was stuck talking to Master Talon. But we'll get to that anyway. So eventually trying to communicate, gesticulate to Kerr, she then gets him to land. Fortunately, lands right outside the area where she needs to go to find Master Talon, which is so there's an unnatural amount of air, the elemental air present in this mountain, and as was revealed in earlier episodes while they were ascending the mountain, there are fissures and cracks within the mountainside where blasts of strong wind and air burst from it repeatedly, and there's kind of a pattern to it. It's almost like it pulsates out of the mountain, and it's through one of these cracks that is the path leading to the master, which meant that Brina and Kerr have to overcome that to then get to the master on the other side. Meanwhile, challenges are mounting for the rest of the party because whilst half of them manage to get through the tunnel no problem at all, Malar then gets stuck Winnie the Pooh style in the tunnel, so with his rear end sticking out and with the other half of him stuck inside the tunnel. Meanwhile, Seth and Brucon on the other side of the crawl space then spot a patrol of manticores heading their way, and then suddenly, action stations, everyone's got to hide! And to be fair, there was an obvious hiding space in the tunnel if they could make it into it, which was fine for Brucon and for Neris, who were already in there. Would have been fine for Seth as well, but I think he wanted to keep more of an eye on things, and due to the fact that he has Cadence's Magnificent Vest, he can cast Minor Illusion as a cantrip whenever he likes, which is very handy indeed. So he instead blocked the entrance to the tunnel by creating a minor illusion of a large rock about 5 feet tall, because that's the limit of the spell, and then hid in that himself. He could just sit inside it and look straight through it and see what's going on outside, which is a very canny thing to do. So canny, in fact, that Leobrin did exactly the same on the other side, although he wouldn't have known that Seth was doing that, but that's what he chose to do, as well as trying to help Malar, help disguise Malar's lower half by throwing his cloak of many fashions over him and making that look like a rock, and then doing a bit of mould earth around that area to make it look like the cloak was kind of sunk into the ground. So it's all very clever how they were doing that. Good use of magic, good use of items, good use of spells. It was just very nice, and they were rewarded because it then meant that the Manticore Patrol didn't spot anything wrong at all. The Aarakocra that they were accompanying the Manticores, these ones known as Aarakocra Windwalkers, Eerie Windwalkers, who are kind of the sage-like Avatar: The Last Airbender style controllers of elemental forces, and they choose the air element because the religion of the Eyrie, sort of bit of lore for you now. So the Eyrie was founded by these Aarakocra who found themselves in the Many Lands, having been taken somehow from their original home, the elemental plane of air. And so since then, they've always been striving to get back to that plane. And so that's why they have gravitated towards the Eyrie, because of its unnatural kind of affinity with elemental air. And the Windwalkers are these devout monks who have devoted themselves to harnessing the power of elemental air. And spoiler alert, but Master Talon is also one such, and a very powerful master of the elements, of the air element, because that's where they want to be, and that's where their gods come from. That's where their whole way of life is, and their whole philosophy is about trying to get back to the elemental plane of air. The only way that they know that or believe that they ascend back there at the moment is through death, but they're trying to find other means, and that's kind of their reason for being at the moment. And so these Windwalkers that are then accompanying the Manticores are a bit more perceptive, but they don't let on that they've spotted anything amiss about the group hiding there or what have you. They carry on regardless. And it's at this point that we also see two more Aarakocra appear with the rope and net in the middle, with a bundle inside the net. And it clearly is a small person. But the guys, despite Leobrin's best efforts looking at it, he can't distinguish who it is. He just sees a green jacket. But we can hypothesize who that may be. And perhaps that'll be confirmed to the rest of the party via some other means next time. That's something to look for. So with that out of the way, once the patrol have moved on, it was quite fun to do a bit of role play with that, because then the group are hiding away, and then it's at this point that these two Manticores decide to have a conversation within earshot of these people they don't know are there. In the same way, I guess, as in the original Star Wars film, when you have the two stormtroopers chatting to each other while Obi-Wan Kenobi's hiding to one side. It's like, what do you think it is? It must be another drill. It was kind of like that, and that's kind of the vibe I was going for, because I do like those popular culture references, as you know. And it was a fun moment to improvise the two characters. Again, I hadn't given much thought into who these characters were, only that one was more senior and one was more junior, one of them being kind of the de facto leader after Ulysses went missing and supposedly was killed. So he made no bones about the fact that he was no fan of Ulysses, the original ruler of the Manticore group here at the Eyrie, and in fact had kind of wanted power himself, so he's kind of glad he's gone, because then he could have that kind of vacuum of power to then jump straight in. And then gave him the name Mangefur, because he was notably mangy around his fur, and I couldn't think of a better name at the time, and I kept thinking of a character in one of the Redwall books, which I used to read when I was younger. Still love those books, they're great. But there was a rat in those who was called Mangefur, and I mean, they have a lot of characters with those kind of I want to say diametric names, or anyway, those names that have the prefix being one word, the suffix being another word, and just kind of slamming them both together. There's a technical term for that, and I can't remember what it is. Sorry. But you know what I mean. So Mangefur was a good one. They also had Wormtail, or they'd have things like Stoneboot, Blabberwort, something like that. So yeah, putting two words together. And Mangefur just came to mind because he was mangy and old and gangly and kind of grotesque. And so that just kind of worked, really. Copyright coming from those books. Yeah, I'm sure it is. It was an inspiration behind the name, but I would say that I don't think they have much claim to that name, to be fair. So, yeah, anyway, a completely different character, Mangefur, the Manticore. So he then kind of gave away his plan almost to the party without knowing they were there before the patrol carried on. And the party were then free to continue trying to get out of the first test, trying to get through the tunnel crawl space. And that didn't go particularly well. Although Malar was assisted through it and he looked like he was going to be the real liability, Leobrin, with his real problems with ceilings, came back again, going through the crawl space because he managed to get stuck, failing his dex check. Managed to get stuck inside the tunnel and then managed to free himself, but that in itself caused an avalanche, caused the whole structure to come crashing down. Fortunately for Leobrin, this time he was able to escape unharmed along with the rest of the party. However, that could have gone horribly wrong. And it did go wrong in a sense because that clashing, crashing, clattering noise then caught the attention of the patrol who had left, and so immediately they were going to come back, requiring the team to think on their feet to come up with a plan very quickly before they appeared, and also to try and hide again, which actually, to be fair, they did a good job of. So they decided, Seth decided to do a minor illusion of a small creature. He chose the form of Belle Quigley, one of the gnomes from back in Hilberg, to disguise to then kind of appear unmoving because it's just an image, a minor illusion, on the path there around the destruction, while the rest of the group then hid away. And it worked. It lured. I mean, the manticores were a bit baffled by it. The younger of the manticores was sent down to investigate it, and thus the trap was sprung. The party immediately acted to attack that manticore, whilst the two in the air were then a bit baffled, hit by a fireball from Nereus, and then just skedaddled and got out of there because not worth their time. Plus, they needed to warn the Eyrie that we had these attackers approaching. But this left the Aarakocra behind, and the Aarakocra then, as I said, the Eyrie Windwalkers, who proved to be pretty formidable in the fight. I think Bart said at the time, it's like, yes, your campaign to show that the Four Elements monk isn't rubbish. And I was like, well, it isn't. I don't need to prove that. Equally, if you're not convinced by the Four Elements monk, check out my Don't Believe the Hype video on our YouTube channel, which there's one all about the Four Elements monk and how it's underrated and it's better than people say it is, because it really is. There are things that I think could be improved with it, especially with the release of new materials such as Xanathar's Guide, and now Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, of course. But for the most part, it's a solid class. It's a solid subclass for the monk. Check it out. Anyway, check out my video if you're not convinced. See what you think. But anyway, these Aarakocra monks, the Windwalkers, were Four Elements monks. They could command elemental air. They had Gust of Wind up their sleeve, and they also had one of my favourite four elemental disciplines, which is the Fist of Unbroken Air, which is great because I believe it forces the character to make a save. If the character fails their save, I think it was a strength save, they not only take 3d10 bludgeoning damage plus another d10 for every extra key point you sink into it, which isn't actually limited, but we'll get onto that up until your maximum number of key points. But you're also the creature is also pushed back 20 feet, and knocked prone. The best part about that is that there is no specification on size. There's no size limitation. So you could use Fist of Unbroken Air on a frickin' ancient dragon. You could punch an ancient dragon with Unbroken Air and you'd knock it back 20 feet and knock it prone. So you could knock it out of the sky, which is incredible. And I can't believe more people haven't picked up on it. But hey ho, there we are. Anyway, this was used to deadly effect because two of the party were on the receiving end of Fists of Unbroken Air, knocking them right towards the edge of the cliff face, to the edge of the path, which then kind of leads very steeply off down the mountainside. And so things could have gone horribly wrong. But Leobrin, being the diplomat courtier that he is, stepped in and whilst one had been taken out by Seth, had been knocked unconscious, or left bleeding out on the floor, Leobrin could step in and use his Fey presence to then charm two of them, and then meanwhile try and reason with the third one to try and convince them that they didn't mean them harm and they were on the same side. They're actually, because they want to take back the Eyrie, they want to take the Manticores out of the equation. He rolled well, to be fair, and they were on board with it, and that's kind of where we leave things with them, where they now have these four quite powerful Aarakocra monks on their side. Remember, they also sent a group of them back to the Eyrie already. The sword fighters of the Eyrie. The Eyrie. It wasn't Windwalkers. That was the Eyrie. The Eyrie. I think it was sword dancers. I think were their names. I'll have to double Sky Dancers. That was it. The Eerie Sky Dancers, who are the more martial, sword-wielding Kensei monks of the Eerie, who are already inside. So building up a bit of resistance, which is great, and so bodes well for then overcoming the next couple of tests and getting to the Eerie to try and thwart the attempts there. It's set up rather well. Will things culminate in session 60 for this arc? Possibly. I don't think it will completely, to be honest, but we'll see how it goes. Meanwhile, we had Brina, who with Kerr, despite getting knocked back a number of times by more elemental air, trying to cross this bridge over a precipice, over a cavern that then seemed to have this elemental air concentrated within it, swirling around. They eventually managed to get over the bridge without falling off, which is very good. They could have easily died from falling 100 or so feet. They managed to get to the other side and then find a gap in the rocks, which leads to an antechamber in which the Master Talon, a kind of dove-like Aarakocra, is left bleeding. Now, they won't have picked up on this, but Master Talon escaped from, spoilers to now, escaped from the Eerie during the coup by the Manticores by turning herself into gas, turning herself into a gaseous form and then moving between the rocks. And that's how she's ended up in this very strange and difficult to reach area, because she could then turn herself into gas and just move through whatever cracks in the rocks there were to try and make good her escape. It's also somewhat abandoning the Eerie, but better to live and fight another day, right? And that's what she chose to do. And she's kind of been left there alone, injured, trying to hang on in the hopes that somebody will come to save them. And meeting Brina was an interesting experience for her, because it's been a long time since she's dealt with the Deep Gnomes. Historically, the Deep Gnomes, of which the clan of which Brina is a part of, the Smurfs of Smurf Haven. Definitely no copyright there with the Smurfs, or any influence from the Smurfs. There was definitely a lot of influence from the Smurfs, but there we are. Used to trade with the Aarakocra, and the Smurfs were very talented alchemists, potion makers, and the like. Whilst the Aarakocra had access to a lot of resources which the Smurfs would not have, due to being above ground, due to the unnatural connection to air, and kind of the wealth of plant life and so on that they have on offer, and also the other skills that the Aarakocra offer. I mean, they clearly can make robes, they can make weapons, they have skills that they can then use to create items and trade. And so Brina had kind of grown up with this belief that the reason why they no longer trade with the Aarakocra is because the Aarakocra actually attempted and succeeded in stealing a rare potion along with its recipe for this cure for an ancient curse, which is also something the party is looking for. This potion of cure curse to try and cure their one lycanthropic charge of trying to cure them of that lycanthropy. That's Greta Graus of Loranlas, the lady who's contracted the disease at the ball all that time ago. All these things interconnecting. Whoa. So Brina that's what she had known to be true. And then the Master Talon, then tells her, no, the deal went ahead fine. We dealt with your representative, Barterswerf, and that's all there was to it. We didn't hear anything after that, and we thought that very strange, because the transaction had proceeded as normal. And so this offers an interesting kind of, I guess, philosophical question for Brina, because she's then going, well, I never had any evidence of any of this. This is just what I've been told. Is this true? Is it not? Is my entire life a lie? Everything's just kind of spiraling for her in that sense. But equally, there's an opportunity there, because if they still have the potion and the recipe in particular, getting at least one of those back will be all Brina needs to then create more of that potion. And as it's such a rare potion, creating more of it would be fantastic, and it'd be something that her clan desperately needs as well, because they are short of trade partners. they're short of resources, and they need more to kind of keep the less well-meaning creatures of the Underdark away from their home, which I'll talk more of next year, because I don't think we're going to get onto it yet. But there's a lot in Brina's backstory and with Sverfhaven, which I've kind of helped create alongside Angelique. There's a lot of good stuff there. So there are motivations for her to get at least one of those things, and for the party too, because they definitely want the potion. Probably don't care about the recipe so much, but they could do with that potion for their charge. So a lot of things at play. The stakes have been raised, sorry, and I think it's setting things up into a really good place for when the group finally get to the Eyrie and put a stop to this Manticore plot. Possibly, of course, the druid who's behind it all as well, who supposedly is in charge of the Manticores, perhaps they'll meet her as well. I guess we'll see. There's a lot at play, a lot to come. I'm really excited to see what happens. There's also a bit of a, not a twist, but an unexpected arrival that will also be heralded in the next session. So look forward to that. We also had one fate dice rolled in the last session, which also will come into play in the next session. That's a week on Monday. So make sure you don't miss it to see what's going on and see our festive finale for 2020. Join us from next Monday at 6 p.m. here on Twitch. And of course, go to our YouTube channel. If you're not following and subscribing to us on YouTube, may I suggest you do so, because this Monday, that's in 3 days' time, we'll be dropping the next session of The Cage. In fact, the premiere event is set up right now, so you can make sure that if you make sure you're subscribed, you'll be notified before that premiere goes live to make sure you don't miss it. And there's been it's been great fun so far in the Cage campaign. I'll talk more about that in a future video, about the shenanigans of what's been going on there. We'll probably do another roundup every 5 sessions. If you've missed the first 5 sessions before session 6, you can catch up on all the action right now without having to watch every single session, which I appreciate is a long time. You can get a great summary and some insights into other things that have been going on in the campaign, into the characters, into the stats. There's some great stats, and a whole lot else in the story so far. The Cage, the story so far, up on our YouTube channel now. It covers everything from session 0 to where we are now, session 5. And as I said, session 6 goes live on Monday at 6 p.m. on YouTube. Make sure you tune into that. Thank you so much for the support this year, guys. It really has meant a lot. And as I said earlier, doing a campaign that was in live play to then going purely online definitely came with a lot of challenges. I think I can probably give you a bit more of an insight into that, actually. So, for one thing, the technical requirements just doubled overnight, because before when we were doing things in actual play, I was running it all off of my old laptop. So I had a webcam that was built in that was on my face, which wasn't very good. We had this one here, along with another webcam that we then were hanging over the table, pointing at the 2 sides of the table to catch the players. Obviously, with the pandemic, that's not an option. We can't have everyone in close proximity in one room. It's just not going to happen, especially because we're from over 6 different households anyway. It's just a nightmare. So it then meant that everyone at home had to make sure that they had a microphone and webcam, or at least a rudimentary version of those set up, ready to go. It meant at my end that then I was having to capture every single person's incoming stream, so catching their audio, their video, and putting it all along with my video and sound and music and so on, all onto the stream on the computer, and the laptop could not take it, couldn't hack it. So I had to invest and upgrade my computer. I've been wanting to do that anyway for various reasons, so that wasn't the only reason I upgraded to the computer, but it sure as hell helped me in that decision process for sure. So that I could then come to you as I am now with the webcam set up here, and then everyone else coming from home. I still bring in the table for sessions because I need the extra desk space to then put all of the figures on, because we're still, rather than using Roll20, which I appreciate is a very good free resource, it does come with its own problems, and it felt like we'd be doing any other Dungeons and Dragons live streamed game, by doing it over Roll20. That seemed, to me, it seemed a bit of a cop out. Didn't seem particularly original for us, and it didn't seem to be in keeping with our brand, if you will. And having the little Lego figures, although can be a bit lame using the same ones over and over, there's just something very nostalgic, very cutesy, fun, and just very us about that. And so I kind of wanted to keep that kind of live action, live play feel to the game. I think eventually we may well do away with the Lego figures and instead have proper miniatures. Maybe one day, if we get some funding, that'd be nice. But in the meantime, using the Lego figures is a lot of fun, and yeah, like I said, it's got a kind of whimsical nature to it, and I think that's very us. So I wanted to kind of keep it as true to the game we were playing when we were all around the same table together as possible, so that it felt less like we were losing. So it felt like we were losing less than we otherwise would be from what our game quintessentially is compared to others. So it was a bit of a challenge. We had some teething difficulties. We still have some teething difficulties, mostly with trying to sync up video and audio. We use Discord for our audio to make sure that everyone's all on the same chat so everyone can hear each other. But equally, it means that if there's an issue with audio, we don't have to lose video to then fix issues with audio. Because we have Discord for audio, and then we use Skype for video. And people ask, well, why don't you use Discord for video? Same reason, we want to keep them separate. But in addition to that, using our streaming software, you can, through Skype, you can capture everyone's individual video feeds as an NDI source. Technical mumbo jumbo, but basically it means that I can then take an image like my webcam feed here, and I can move it around on its own, which I couldn't do if they weren't NDI sources. What happens when you use Discord video was then you'd only capture the whole window with everyone's video on it, and then I'd have no control over where each video feed was on the screen. So you just have one box with everyone in it, which again doesn't look great, and we were using it at first when we moved online. But for me, it didn't look great, didn't have much control over what was going on the display, and just, yeah, it just wasn't as smooth and seamless as we would want it to be. And weirdly, it ended up the computer would use more resources and use more memory when it was running video on Discord along with audio compared to using video on Skype and audio on Discord. Bizarre, I know, but seems to be how it worked. So we are where we are now. I've been gradually just moving the goalposts with the syncing of sound to try and get it to match up with video, which again has some issues sometimes, because sometimes other people's video feeds come in at slightly different speeds. It tends to fluctuate, which means things go out of sync, and it's a pain. It really is. We really like everyone to just be in sync. If you have any suggestions on how to do that easily without losing too much quality, let me know. I've been considering having just the audio on Skype as well, because that seems to negate any syncing issues. But then the quality of the sound isn't as good. So it's a real toss-up to kind of work out what's the best way forward. But anyway, that's kind of an insight into the DMing in a pandemic has been like. It's been challenging. It's been rewarding. I feel like we've definitely, I would say, looking back on 2020, we've definitely upped our game since we started in 2019. Both literally and metaphorically, the players have leveled up, literally. And equally, I think that our output now is just looking so much better, so much more kind of seamless, I guess. Transitioning between scenes, and now we have our own kind of combat screen that we then go to, so you get a bigger display of my video feed for that. So then we can go back to RP where it's smaller. So I think everything's just looking a lot more polished, and it's coming together nicely. And we're always improving, always looking to ways to improve things. But it's nice sometimes to just take a moment and appreciate how far you've come. And so I guess this is kind of what that is. Anyway, that's probably enough navel gazing for today. thank you so much for tuning in to today's Campaign Diary and Q&A, and I'll be seeing you in this intimate setting again in 2021. Until then, thank you. Have a great holiday season. Have a great New Year's, and we'll see you soon. And as I said, Monday, YouTube, go check it out. The Cage, 6 p.m. GMT. Anyway, until then, have a safe weekend. Stay safe. Good night.